Hello and welcome to Newsnight. I am Ladi Akeredoluale. Thanks for joining us. My guest on the program today says the focus on increasing minimum wage as part of palliatives in the aftermath of petrol subsidy removal must be stopped and a more holistic approach involving all stakeholders embarked upon. My guest also thinks that some of the enunciated economic objectives of the President Tinubu administration would appear to be somewhat contradictory. Newsnight talks to the Director General of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA, Mr. Adewale Oyerinde. Mr. Adewale Oyerinde, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having us.
You are, as at the time of this interview, at the ILO conference in Geneva, Switzerland. So I guess it's a fitting venue to discuss some of the issues that we have on the ground. Perhaps I could begin by saying that the new administration in Nigeria has been on the seat for just a couple of days as at the time of this interview, but already quite a number of economic pronouncements that have profound impact on the economy have already been made, some in terms of policy announcements, some already being implemented. What do you make of what has happened thus far?
I think for us, the certain steps that have been taken by the president or by the administration, they are welcome steps. He made a policy statement to give a framework of the entire policy direction that he intends to drive the nation, which is also welcome to us. Removal of the fuel subsidy. We never had someone that we mustered the political will to do that, and he did that and he did it quickly. He mentioned the engagement with the organized private sector, mentioned the multiplicity of taxes, security, and so many other policies that we feel we all know the issues basically. An average Nigerian understands the challenges that we face. But the critical issue that is happening to us and it's important to organize businesses is the framework for achieving each and every of those laudable policies. Someone said you campaign in poetry and then you govern in prose. Now the challenge for the government will be to ensure that the citizens, the expectations that have been built in the context of the campaign period is not that. So while the citizens, or while we all swallow the bitter pill, they must make sure that the pill is not too bitter in such a way that it talks an average Nigerian into food. There's going to be challenges, absolutely, but they must create an environment and definitively create a path towards resolving those issues. Those are the critical issues for us. Less of those policy statements.
Now, you as the representative of employers in this matter would probably be quite concerned. One of those bitter pills, as you pointed out, is the removal of the subsidy on fuel. There have been arguments over the method that was used to do it, and that perhaps it could have been better organized, particularly given the little confusion that followed it. The announcement, that is. But in terms of its impact on the industry, we all know that most employers these days use petrol for cars, but more importantly, they use petrol in large quantities as well, particularly the small and medium ones, to power energy sources. So how much of an impact do you think this announcement and this policy of removal would have on those energy sources and the ability to be able to afford the continuation of the use of those energy sources in the absence of more stable power supply?
That is obviously there's going to be issues. There's going to be, and it's not a factor of the challenges that we will have. It's the challenges that we are having now, and the removal has, to some extent, compounded those challenges. And for every problem, there's always a solution. And one of the solutions, one of the mitigating options that will inform government, will share with government, is that look, we canvassed for removal of subsidies. We also canvassed for the rehabilitation, quick rehabilitation, and transparent privatization of those refineries. Now, within the context of the challenges currently, we've asked government. Now, the cost of input definitely will increase. There will be a spike in inflation. But to help organize business, we currently pay over 60 different taxes, levies, and fees across the three strata of government. Recently, just 2 months ago, there is an increase in excise duty and the introduction of new taxes. There is about 21, 22 bills lying at the National Assembly, which also seeks to compel employers to pay 0.5%, 1% of their profit after tax. This is our position. You need to create a platform, an environment that will enable the organized businesses to be sustainable. If you remove fuel subsidy in the immediate, then let's look for palliatives, taxes that we can remove. How do we make business environment more conducive so that businesses can continue to thrive? If we don't do that, we run the risk of continuous inflation. The prices of products and services of organized businesses will continue to spike because of the cost of input. So even if you deal with the demand side, you increase salaries, you increase wages, those wages will still meet increased cost of goods and services, which will negate or neutralize whatever increase in wage that you give. So businesses are currently challenged. We have asked government to create immediate palliative relief for businesses so that they can continue to remain sustainable.
Now, what you've raised are two sides of what some would say are essentially the same thing. And we have not been able to get the balance right in the past when we have been faced with situations like this. First of all, labor, as in organized labor, when we are faced with situations like this, apart from some of the other things they talk about, immediately they go to the issue of wages. So they talk about increase in wages. On the other side are the things that you mentioned. Even if wages increase, that someone I was talking to said, even if wages increase, what we have noticed in the past is that immediately wages go up, every other thing that you want to buy with those wages will also go up to meet up and in sometimes exceed the wage increase. So you find that you are running twice as hard to remain on the same spot. Sometimes you are running thrice as hard to remain on the same spot. So in this particular instance, already, Labour has put on the table a 200,000 naira minimum wage, coming from 30,000, which not everybody was paying as at the time this new administration took office. Now, in terms of how that will impact employers and the economy, some would say it's obvious. There will be massive layoffs. I mean, if this were to become law, even though Labour is now clarifying that the new minimum wage discussion is to take place in the last quarter of this year because the new minimum wage is not due until next year. But the question is, as NECA, as employers, you have said federal government should put in place a wage fixing mechanism. What do you mean, especially against this background?
So fortunately, we are in the ILO, and I work in the committee of the application of standards. And it will interest you that as we speak, about 2 or 3 countries have been brought to the committee of application of standards, discussing their non-compliance to the convention, ILO Convention 121 on minimum wage fixing. We don't fix minimum wage from the top down, it's from the down up. It's tripartite. Employers represented by NECA, the union, and government, forming a national minimum wage committee. So whatever proposition the union has, they bring it to the table. The employers bring in their propositions. Then we look at all the parameters, including cost of living, including the ability to pay, including so many socio-economic factors. Now, yesterday we came up with a statement beyond the national minimum. While we support absolutely the need for us to reconvene that national minimum wage committee to start negotiation of the national minimum wage. Because the last one was in 2019. So 2024, we should have another minimum wage. But beyond the national minimum wage, all those issues beyond the minimum wage we must discuss it. We must focus more concurrently on the issues of how do we reduce the cost of living. Because if the cost of living continues to go up, pay workers 1 million naira, it will be neutralized by the increased cost of living. So we must focus on the minimum wage and concurrently focus on how do we reduce the cost of living and raise the standard of living of average Nigerians, not only the workers, but the whole household. If we don't do that, we will have set a scheme that will negate itself or that will contradict itself at the beginning. So for 200,000 that our comrade friend mentioned, is part of the proposal. We can bring it to the table, but let's test each proposal within the context of the ability to pay, within the context of productivity, within the context of the many socioeconomic challenges that we currently have. Then we arrive at a realistic national minimum wage. Suffice to say, that at the private sector, we really don't have much of a challenge with the issue of national minimum wage, issue of minimum wage. Because currently, employers in the private sector, sectorally, we negotiate every 2 years through the instrumentality of collective bargaining, which sets wages on biannually. So you might see in a sector, in the private sector, that the minimum wage is about 45,000, some about 50,000, some about 60,000, depending on the sector. So, but the national minimum wage, the minimum amount that anybody should pay, we still have the responsibility to set that transparently, and we still have the responsibility to commence that as quickly as possible.
But most people will tell you that, I mean, if you add those who are in formal employment in government at the federal, state, and local levels, and you add those who are in the organized private sector, which you, of course, represent employers there, you put them together, they still form a very small percentage of those who are in some form of employment, particularly in the informal sector, where the issue of minimum wage does not arise. People pay what they can afford. And that speaks to what you just ended your last answer with, which is that we've got to be realistic. The issue of ability to pay comes to bear. Because if I were to employ a domestic servant, I'm not likely to say, oh, because this is the minimum wage, I can't pay that domestic servant less than that, and therefore send the person who is looking for work away. He or she will be willing to accept whatever it is I offer, even if it is below the national minimum wage, in order to be able to get some income. Now, I use that as the example to set the background about the vast majority of Nigerians are not in the organized public sector. They are not in the organized private sector, if you will pardon my use of those phrases. How do we take care of those ones? Because your employers group will, I'm sure, also have people who don't fall within strictly these two groups, but who are in that third group.
Now, beautiful question you just had. And, while we were having our brainstorming session, some issues came up. And government needs to be very innovative. Now, for those outside the organized, as we call them, you cannot leave them behind in the context of all this conversation. And that's why we said, beyond the national minimum wage, focus on how do we reduce the cost of living of an average Nigerian. How do we put more money in the hands of average Nigerians? And two ways that government can address that. And part of the conversation that we have also raised at the ILO in the context of the employers. One, our social protection law, our social protection mechanism, we need to rejig it. We need to work in such a way that we deal with the issue of vulnerability. There are vulnerable persons everywhere. And no matter how much we try, there will always be vulnerable persons. They are everywhere in our midst. Our social protection scheme must be rejigged in such a way that it directly affects or improves the life of those that are actually vulnerable. The second thing that government can do is to focus on what we call wage goods. Wage goods are what are those typical things that an average person always spend money on, whether you are educated, you are not educated. Three of those things I will tell you. One is accommodation, rent. Second one is food. Food. third is transportation. And fourth is education. Now, government should concurrently, whatever saving that we are making with the removal of fuel subsidy, deal with the issue of the public transportation, not in the context of buying buses or empowering individuals with schemes that has never worked. So if you look back at the other schemes we've had in time past that aims to deal with the issue of subsidy removal, where are they now? They all fail. But we must restructure our public transport system in such a way that it meets the needs of the average Nigerians. Deal with the issue of the transportation, deal with the issue of food security, and for you to deal with that, you have to deal with the issue of insecurity generally in the north and the areas where we have food markets, and then deal with the issue of rent through mortgages and through rent-to-own schemes. These things are not 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 1 year project. The project must put in place to progressively take a lot of people out of the poverty line. All summed up within the context of reducing the cost of living of an average Nigerian. Thank God that the president signed the student loan today. We have not seen the full details of the bill, but the snapshot of it seems to provide a succor to students that have challenges with progressing with their education, a loan without collateral, but with very stringent guarantee conditions, which is fine. But those actions, those efforts must be concurrent in such a way that you don't leave anybody behind. As we are dealing with the national minimum wage, we are dealing with supporting organized businesses to remain competitive. If they are not competitive, as you mentioned, layoff will come, businesses will close, and the new concept that we have now, Japa syndrome. We know the Japa syndrome for employees. There is a new Japa and Japaism happening with employers now, where people close job here, they move to Togo, they move to Benin Republic, they move to Ghana, produce, and through the instrumentality of the African free trade, African continental free trade, they bring their goods one way or the other, either legally or illegally. They bring it back to the country, making us just a sales point, which is another big issue that government needs to deal with. So focus on those three issues: wage, goods, as I mentioned there, accommodation, transportation, food, and education. We're already dealing with the issue of education.
Some would describe it as a cushion that is there. The last administration was going to disburse it. The $800 million loan that was supposed to be specifically to provide mitigation methods or mitigation facilities for this subsidy removal. But at least as far as we know, that money was not actually disbursed. So there is that $800 million there. And the debate about what to do with it, whether it is to go to, as you call it, safety nets for the vulnerable individuals within the society, or it is to be given to employers to also expand their own production facilities and so on, so that they can employ more people as part of the mitigation methods, and more people will get pay packets at the end of the day. Which one should we pursue out of this? Because at least if the money is still there, $800 million, as you and I speak today, is a lot of money. It will not solve, it's not a silver bullet kind of amount, but at least it can push us in the right direction if we choose it.
You know, that is not $800 million. If you remove the administrative charges, the amount budgeted to deal with the administrative issues around you, you will realize about a quarter of that $800 million is gone, which is another sort of worry for us. Now you say you give 5,000 naira to 10 million households per month. 5,000 naira. That is cosmetic. It's cosmetic, with due respect, it's shallow. And we think that's not the direction that we should be going. In the short term, the 5,000 for 10 million households, it's not what we should be talking about now. we have faced a major challenge with rising costs due to the issue of the removal. What Nigerians want and what organized businesses there are now are clear roadmap that if we are to suffer for a while, show us a path towards a sustainable growth for the income level of workers, a sustainable path for general increase in the life and welfare of average Nigerians, show us a definitive path to creating a hospitable environment for businesses to thrive. The short-term effect of 5,000 naira for 10 million households, we can't feel it. Absolutely. What will 5,000 do for an household? So, and the 10 million household that we have called, how do we arrive at the issue of the 10 million? Whatever social security measure you are putting in place, it is not backed as adequate data. Then you run the risk of creating another scheme for the boys to share. And those are our concerns. Let's leave the 800 billion naira and come back and decide effectively what exactly do we do. But first, not distributing 5,000 naira to 100 to 10 million households to share, because that will not stop anything. Also, not sharing that money within any context of consumption. Let's look at building structures that will sustain us beyond 3 months short term, 6 months short term, 9 months or 1 year short term. That is what we should be looking at currently. And as I mentioned earlier, short term 3 months, look at the workers area before the issue of national minimum wage will come up. We reduce the tax exposure of employees so that we can put more cash in the hands of employees. We reduce the burdensome tax regime that current businesses are currently paying so that they can breathe fresh and then remain sustainable. Once we can guarantee the existence of both, it trickles down to the general environment and to Nigerians as a whole. But the 800 million naira sharing 5,000 to 10 million households, we are absolutely not in support of that.
The single cost that makes manufactured goods in Nigeria or even services that are produced by Nigerian businesses uncompetitive would be power, the cost of power. Now, along with all the other things that we have discussed so far, President Bola Tinubu has signed the new Electricity Law 2023. I haven't seen the details of it, but from what we have been told, one of the key things is that it now enables, it's been removed from the exclusive list, which means that it's not longer a federal government only enterprise. That means that other people can now get involved in electricity supply or provision. Is this a positive development, do you think? And if so, in terms of implementation, which is where we always fall, how do we go about this? Because it's not as if other people have not tried this before in the history of the country. Several people reminded me that the Lagos state government attempted to do this under now President Bola Tinubu when he was governor in Lagos, when you had the Enron saga in 2003 and 2004, if my memory serves me right. So what do you make of this?
You know, if you recollect, years ago, we have NASCO in Jos. So I served in Jos. And those days, NASCO was generating power. And that was prior to the bogus privatization of the power sector that we did. NASCO was generating power and it was selling power to the villages and towns in Jos. So if a private organization can do it then and did it successfully, the question you probably ask next is, but the DISCOs and GENCOs, they are private organizations. Now, the answer will be, how transparent, how much of due diligence was done in the unbundling of NECA before selling to those private entities? So the new bill by the president is a welcome development. If you take away the issue of power, you have solved almost half of the problem of organized business, apart from the issue of forest. Forest comes next, and the regulatory issues that we currently face comes third. To take away the issue of power, then you have put Nigeria back on the path of rapid industrialization. So we welcome that. Why it's also not going to be a one-day flip chart that made the pronouncement, then each government will just power plant will just spring up from each of those states. But it's a welcome development. It's now left for the governors of the state to be innovative enough, either to go into public-private partnership with experts in the private sector to create and quickly create that process, initiate that process, and build your own power plant so that you can enhance your potential for industrialization. That is the path that we think each governor of the territory states tread. But we welcome the development of the president signing the bill. We believe that that should be the way we should be going, right? It's a way we should have gone before now. What happened in Lagos State, we can't say precisely whether there were bottlenecks, whether there were institutional issues that the state government has to deal with. We are not private to all this. But now that we have the bill signed into law, no state, each government of our 36 states to do whatever it takes for them to leverage on that opportunity to change the narrative concerning the industrialization of their state.
You made reference to it earlier in one of the answers to the earlier questions, where you talked about the level of taxation, multiple taxes from various agencies and bodies, and you talked about the latest one, which was the one that then came to light after the last administration left, which the then President Muhammadu Buhari had signed into law just on the eve of his departure, which is the Finance Law 2023, which in its provisions has room for some of the taxes that you mentioned. Now, it comes as just as the new president, Bola Tinubu, talked about harmonization of taxes. So these are two, shall we say, two objectives running in parallel, in opposite direction, because the finance law seeks to jack up revenue for government, whereas President Tinubu talks about harmonization of taxes to ease payment. So how are you receiving this? And if this new law, which has just become law, is against what the new president wants to achieve, how do we then square it?
Through the removal of fuel subsidy, there's natural increase in prices of goods and services and price of input. The fiscal policy measure, as you mentioned, encapsulated in the finance bill, increased excise duty disproportionately, outrageously, that creates serious challenge for the sustainability of the sector. Introduction of new taxes also came up, the green tax. We have pleaded severally for the issue of harmonization of taxes. And when it was done, and there was a research by about two top-level consulting firms in Nigeria, one of the top four, that also showed that even after the harmonization that was done years back, there seems to be more taxes to be paid. So what we are appealing to the government is, if you want to drive growth, then make the tax environment conducive. If you want to drive growth, make the tax environment conducive. In fact, we have appealed that the provisions of the Finance Act, it should be suspended for now. The new taxes, the increment in excise tax and so many others, we should suspend it now and ensure stability. Our first focus must be stability. And then once we stabilize, then the president should look at those inherent contradictions. And I was telling you, there are so many contradictions. And those are the things that characterize the last government. We come up with the policy A to drive employment generation, and within the same system, other agencies of government are implementing policies that are stifling the ability of businesses to generate employment. So concurrently, in the same system, you have serious contradictions, one pro and the other one negating those pro effects. And we feel the government should take a critical look at this. First, the finance bill, they should constitute a committee to look at it first. Suspend the implementation and let us do a thorough review of taxes that we pay, when we pay, and what exactly are we paying the tax for. So we align with that constitution of harmonizing, transparently harmonizing the taxes to be pro-growth. If you do anything that is contrary, that is not driving you towards growth, we are just compounding our problem. So let them suspend the new tax system and let us deal with these many issues of harmonization for us to know exactly what we have to pay for, how we have to pay it, and then when we have to pay it.
You did mention earlier that there were two existential threats to the success of businesses and the private sector in particular. One, of course, is power. The second, which you referenced, was the issue of Forex. And that is what I am now coming to, because one of the things President Tinubu says he wants to address is the multiplicity of exchange rates and the leverage that this gives insiders for rent seeking. And arbitrage in transactions, whereas those who actually need Forex in manufacturing and so on, and even airlines, tickets, repatriation of fees and all of that, are not able to access the Forex. But how realistic is this? How realistic is it for him to harmonize, to be able to harmonize the interest rates without inherently devaluing the currency to the point where we also have an inflationary problem?
You know, as I this afternoon, I saw from Geneva, I saw a news item that the CBN has informed banks to remove the cap on rate. So invariably, the market forces will determine the rate of the naira. So while it is desirable for us to have one forex exchange rate, why it's desirable for us to have just one single exchange rate, it is also important for us to drive up our capacity and ability to attract foreign. Because if you leave the market forces to determine it only, then you probably create other problems. As it is currently, oil, petroleum, crude oil seem to be the largest sources of our foreign exchange. And government assets, government income, government revenue by way of forex has also been compromised by the many challenges of oil theft that we face, that is ongoing, by the many challenges that we also face at borders. So we expect government to concurrently also wrap up production of its allocation of crude oil by oil. Because if you don't have enough forex, if we have so much naira, a lot of naira pursuing the little forex that is available, which continues to drive up the exchange rate. So while that is desirable, let's make it one forex exchange, because the previous thing doesn't encourage productive activity, doesn't encourage manufacturing. Why would I go into manufacturing when I can get dollars at 450 naira from the banks or from the CBN and go across the street and sell it for 700 naira? Why would I go through the stress of manufacturing? So the private sector supports crashing of exchange rates to one single unit. But government must not throw up its hands and say market forces is just determining why we have not dealt with the issue of the supply of forex. The private sector will not deal with it, but government must provide a platform, enabling environment that forex will be available, and those that generate forex, they will also be able to repatriate their forex out of the country. As you mentioned, airlines at the point they have over $700 billion that is trapped in Nigeria that they can't repatriate. And if I'm an investor, and have $1 billion to bring to Nigeria, I probably will not go to the Federal Ministry of Finance or Trade and Investment to ask them, can I come and invest in Nigeria? I will look for businesses of my friends that are already operating in Nigeria. I will look for friends that have investment, and I ask them, is the Nigerian environment conducive for me to bring my $1 billion to invest? If they say yes, then I'll bring in the $1 billion, which adds to the pool of forests that we have. If they say no, then I take my $1 billion and go somewhere else, which also creates further problems for the country. So we support the single window forex, but government should not throw its hands up and say, let the market forces determine the rate. As of today, I heard that the rate of naira is almost 700 something naira to a dollar because of the removal of the cap. That is, I can't confirm that yet. I heard that while in the meeting in Geneva here. But those are the issues that we'll continue to have until we stabilize the system as we currently have it.
There are many things that are fluid currently about the system, and one can expect that when we are having transitions from one administration to the other. Many people have said this government has hit the ground running, particularly when it comes to economic matters. There's so much going on all at the same time. Now, one of the things that is going on, of course, is that the government has embarked on what it described as a reform of the Central Bank of Nigeria. The current governor has been suspended, an acting governor has been appointed. And one of the things that many people criticized the central bank for over the years has been the issue of interest rates. That interest rates have been such that, contrary to what is happening in other economies that are even more productive than Nigeria's, that are bigger than Nigeria's, that interest rates are so high in Nigeria that the only people who can take loans for any particular venture in Nigeria are traders, and more specifically 90-day traders who just go import things, sell, and then return the money. That for a manufacturer, except what you are manufacturing is either contraband or illegal, the rate of interest in Nigeria is not sustainable. So in terms of interest rate stability, what is to be done now as part of the reforms of the CBN, which this government says it is embarking upon, that would benefit the manufacturing, the industrial, and the service sectors, which of course also employ a whole lot of people?
You know, you mentioned the issue of the 90 days trader, and those activities, they hit directly at the heart of manufacturing. Once you make the interest rate even above a single digit, what you have canvassed for is a single digit interest rate, in such a way that productive and real sector can actually borrow for productive activities. The moment it gets to the current rate, which makes borrowing even unattractive, then we create a system where we turn the country to basically an import-driven country. Only those that can turn over their goods, import things, and turn over within 90 days, within 50 days, they will be the only ones that will be able to approach the bank to collect loans. So what we have requested for, and one of the key things that the organized public sector have informed the government, make the interest rate single digit. Whatever it will cost, whatever reform that the government can come up with, but there should be a refocus, a deliberate refocus on ramping up our productive capacity in such a way that it is convenient for the real sector to borrow for real activities that will impact the heart of the Nigerian state. But it's when they produce that we can generate employment. It's when they produce and we generate employment that government can even make revenue that is in shortfall for now. So a deliberate attempt should be made by government through its fiscal and monetary policy to make sure that the interest rate is not above the single digit rate. It is possible. In many countries that we have researched, these are being done because of the focused and deliberate attempt. So I will emphasize the word deliberate attempt to prop up their productive capacity and make their country a truly productive country. If we don't do that, we create double-edged problem for ourselves. People will either borrow and you have increase in default rate of your loans. People will either borrow and borrow in such a way that they produce and the cost of goods and services continue to increase. So it takes a deliberate attempt, a focused attempt to pick your priority. So many priorities. Education is a priority. Power is a priority. Security is a priority. But you must pick your priority or identify your priority in such a way that if I address A, does A have the potential to affect B, C, D? Or does A have the potential to drag along in its trajectory of growth sector A, B, C, D, E? If it has that potential, then it becomes a priority for me. Because as I'm spending money on A, it's naturally dragging along other sectors in its trajectory of growth. So if manufacturing becomes a focus for government, it won't cost much within the context of its reforms to bring down the interest rate to that level, single digit, where manufacturing can take it. And the myriad of social issues that we have, social issues that are effects of unemployment, there are effects of business closures. You will have solved many of those problems and you have solved them deliberately. But it takes a deliberate attempt and it takes the reassessment of your priorities. If manufacturing is not the priority of government, then we'll continue to create reasons or come up with excuses why interest rates will continue to go high.
It does appear as if there is a certain paradox that has since emerged. And I want to know whether you agree with that, because on one hand, the removal of fuel subsidy, of the subsidy on petrol, and then what you described earlier as the instruction to the banks, removing the cap on the rate of exchange at that level as well, would appear to be free market enterprise policies. But on the other hand, the president has also talked about the reintroduction of commodity boards. Now, many of those who can remember when we had commodity boards will tell you that commodity boards are not a free enterprise mechanism. They were to encourage, as you just said, massive production of particular things for which government then guaranteed a minimum price at which it would mop up everything that was produced from those who are doing the production. Now, the reintroduction of the commodity boards, in your view then, and given this background, it seems tailored in an entirely different direction, not completely free market, is it?
I will answer the question using the analogy of the announcement of the removal of fuel subsidy. And the announcement was announced, the comment was made. The next day, we started seeing queue filling stations. Most of those filling stations, they had the old store.
Yes.
So if you allow, within the context of our development level, if you allow a free market, you create the avenue for unscrupulous individuals to hijack the process. Because also your regulatory framework must be such that it can deal with those issues, those unscrupulous elements, and I want to exploit that policy. If your regulatory framework is not strong enough to deal with it, or if you don't have the strength, political will to deal with those issues, then you must create some guide. Some call it guided free market. Some call it guided regulation. Some might call it guided, depending on the name that each country wants to call it. In such a way that while you regulate, while you say the market should be the market should be determine the price, but you don't remove your hand totally from it, so that those that might want to game the system, those that might want to take advantage of the system, so that they will not try. We have the issue of the border. borders should be opened or not opened. While it is desirable that customs do their work, but you still have some elements that will still find a way to import goods through many products. So for us, pick your ad. Now the fasting is hard. Eating food is also hard. So you pick your ad. At this stage that we are in, government must speak is hard. And most especially, they must do whatever it is to encourage citizens' consensus. They must build consensus around any policy that they are coming up with. Because the success of those policies or the failure of it, beyond the thinking that must have gone behind it, there must be citizens' consensus. They must carry the whole Nigerians along to the implementation of it. Commodity Board, they work in time past. Are they relevant to the context of our reality? I don't know. What is the thinking behind government plan to introduce the Commodity Board? We can't say precisely. And that's why we say we need the framework. How will Commodity Board work now? How will those structures, those policy statements, what are the frameworks that will drive them? The framework that will drive them point towards their success or will point towards the otherwise of those policies. But we need to see explicitly the framework that will drive those policies. If there are no frameworks, we'll be making conjectures, we'll be making suggestions that are probably dangerous to an average Nigerian that doesn't understand the whole context of the conversation. But the framework for those policies will really help us to make very informed comments.
Now, there's something else that the issue of framework is important to, and there have been back and forth on this, and it comes to mind because twice or thrice now within this conversation, you have mentioned the issue of our borders and their porous nature, and that is the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which, depending on who you talk to, some will tell you, oh, that is the game changer. It's going to open up the continent and is going to accelerate its growth. And then there are others who are a lot more cautious. One of those who was extremely cautious was our immediate past president, Muhammadu Buhari, who was it took a long time for him to sign on to that agreement. And part of the reason we are told was that Nigeria is the largest market on the continent. It has a whole lot of people and a lot of people who can immediately buy goods. And so all kinds of tricks were being employed to get Nigeria's market open to everybody. Now, for those of you who are inside, who are trying to manufacture for the local market, and in some instances to export to the outside world, this is a catch-22 situation, it appears, because while you don't want to close your borders completely to people from outside, otherwise they will do the same to you, you also don't want to open the borders to allow everything come in, otherwise you may not be competitive in terms of pricing. So where are you in terms of this Continental Free Trade Agreement? There are some of your members who I've spoken to who say to me that, look, they want Nigeria to promote made in Nigeria the way everybody is doing it. Is that really the official position?
It's really a catch-22 situation, really. And I dare say also that the interest for many African countries and their interest, their enthusiasm about the AfCFTA is probably the market, the huge market that Nigeria provides. 200 million people, the biggest in Africa. That seems to be the attraction. And now that we have signed, it is the fear for organized business. If government did not deal with the infrastructural gap currently existing, if the regulatory environment for businesses here in Nigeria is still inhospitable, then we have commenced the process of the requiem mass for many businesses in this country. Because if your goods are not competitive, and others are bringing goods from similar goods or substitute goods. They are bringing it from outside and bringing to sell to compete with your goods that is of higher prices. Then we run an existential risk as a result of our participation in the African capital. Now, the second flip side is this. The African market is quite big. Nigeria have one of the best innovative, one of the most resilient employers and businesses in this country. If we get it right from the side of government as providing the requisite infrastructure and environment for businesses to thrive, then it becomes a game changer for us. But if we don't, we have created a system that will cause enormous challenge, not only for organized businesses in Nigeria, but also for government itself, because our jobs will be exported, businesses will close down from here, probably go somewhere else and commence productive activity, bring their goods here to sell, as we are currently seeing, which change the dynamics even for our national growth. So we are in AFCFTA already, and the appeal to government, to the new administration, let's focus on bridging the infrastructural gap. Yes, we understand that over 20 trillion gap in infrastructural development exists currently. But the immediate things we can do to make our environment comfortable and convenient for businesses to operate, we should do that. If we are not doing it, we are in AFCFTA for the African market, not necessarily for the Nigerian market. So it's a dicey situation. I'm hoping the new government will take a critical look at it and listen to the cries of organized business. It's an enlightened self-interest for the federal government to take a critical look at the issue of infrastructure and deliberately, like I re-emphasize, deliberately create that environment for organized businesses to thrive, to be sustainable first. Then we now talk of competition.
Very important food for thought, very good way to conclude this conversation. Mr. Adewale Oyerinde, thank you so much for your time and for the unique insight on many of these issues that are now unfolding under the new administration of President Bola Tinubu. We wish them the very best of luck and hope that they take the right decisions in the interest of all. But thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thank you for having us.
That's our program today. We would, of course, like to hear from you on the conversation. Our various social media handles are right there on your screen. You can also listen to this and previous episodes of the program via our podcast and watch as well on our YouTube pages. Please visit our website, channelstv.com/podcast to get started. I'm Ladi Akiriduluale. Goodbye.